After making the decoction, it is cooled enough to be handled. You can see Swamiji is praying before he strains the decoction. When making medicines, it is very useful to pray or to recite some mantra. Perhaps we can address this subject in more depth in a future video. For now, it will suffice to say that prayer or mantra centers a person and puts them into a suitable state of consciousness for making healing preparations. Mantra in particular creates a mystical vibration of healing and opens a channel to the inner realm so the devas may empower the medicine being made. When the practice of making medicine is offered to the Lord, the pranas of the herbs, oil, and other substances can be used by the devas to send healing energies into the physical realm. Medicines empowered in this way have absolutely miraculous power to heal all conditions. For straining a decoction, it is easiest to use a large, thick piece of unbleached, undyed, kitchen-grade cotton muslin cloth placed over a large sieve. We are using smaller and thinner pieces of cheesecloth because that is what we have on hand. Because cheesecloth is very thin, it will not serve as an effective filter unless it is layered. Once the liquid has drained through the cloth, the herbs are squeezed in the cloth to extract excess liquid. This process is repeated until all the decoction has been strained from the herbs. The herbs may then be discarded or added to the compost pile. Because their healing properties have been extracted, they are not suitable for use in other herbal preparations. We like returning the herbs to the earth and thanking them for their help when possible. The finished decoction will look like a thick brown liquid as seen here. After straining the decoction, it should be measured to ensure that it is close to the required amount. If the liquid is a little more than called for in the recipe, this is not a big problem, as the excess liquid will cook away as the Tailam is processed further. If the liquid is too little, this should be remedied by adding water to make up for the deficiency. If Tailam is cooked with less decoction than a recipe calls for, the essence of the kalka may not have an opportunity to be fully extracted into the cooking Tailam. We had a little bit less decoction than needed, 10.5 cups instead of 12 cups, and so we added 1.5 cups of water to remedy this. One reason that decoction is used in the processing of herbal oil is that a much larger quantity of herbs can be added to the oil in this way. When using a powder or paste of herbs alone, the amount of herbs used will be limited by the amount of oil, because only a certain amount of herbal substance will fit into the oil. When using the liquid essence of herbs created by decocting the herbs in water, it is possible to add much more to the oil, because when cooked together, the liquid will evaporate, leaving very little physical particles of herbs in the oil. In addition to oil and decoction, kalka or paste of herbs is used for cooking Ayurvedic oils. For kalka, a fine powder of herbs is used. Because properly cooked kalka will adhere as a mass in the cooked oil, straining of even the finest particles is no problem. We are powdering our herbs for kalka as described earlier. To create a fine powder, herbs are ground in a grinding machine, or better yet, pounded in a mortar and pestle. Once the herbs are ground well, they must be passed through a sieve to separate the fine powder from larger pieces that remain unground. These larger pieces may be ground again and added to the powder. This straining is important for recipes calling for a fine powder of herbs, and recipes where the herbs will be eaten in particular. The screen must be the right size, and so it may be necessary to experiment with different sizes. The screen must be the right size, and so it may be necessary to experiment with different sized sieves.
until the right result is attained. If the screen is too fine, the powder will not pass through, and if it is too large, then coarse pieces of herb will get into the finished powder.
For making kalka, water is added to the herbs in a bowl and mixed to create a watery paste. If you are making this recipe at home, you may wish to make 3 separate kalkas, one from each herb, as these will need to be cooked separately in the oil. The reason for making kalka rather than adding powder of herbs for cooking Ayurvedic oils is that when added to a mixture of water and oil, powder may form clumps, which will prevent the herbs from being exposed to the oil and releasing their healing essence into the oil. If a kalka or paste is made before adding the herbs to the oil and liquid, this ensures that the herbal powder will be evenly distributed throughout the cooking oil and that the essence of the herbs will be imparted to the finished tailam. The oil and kalka paste are then added to a pan along with the decoction, and this mixture is cooked until the liquid evaporates. The recipe for Siddha Tailam calls for the oil to be cooked 3 separate times. One time with the kalka of each of the 3 separate herbs in the formula. The reason for the repeated cooking of this recipe is that it is only possible to cook a limited amount of kalka in a certain amount of oil, and this recipe calls for more herbs than would otherwise fit into the cooking oil. If we want to make an oil with extra potency, this is most easily achieved by repeated cooking. This process is called avartana, or repetition, and the oils produced in this way are known as avartani tailam. Each time the oil is cooked, new herbs are added, and for certain formulas the oil is processed 7, 10, 14, 28, 100, 101, or even 1,000 times, each time using a new batch of herbs. Avartani tailam has exceptional potency, and for the strongest ones only a drop or 2 is ever needed. For Siddha Tailam, 3 separate kalkas are made by adding water to 2 ounces each of anise seed, costus, or angelica in this case, and licorice. The kalkas are made separately, as they will be cooked into the oil one at a time, along with 1/3 of the finished decoction. This technique is much more effective than simple infused oil, because it is possible to use more herbs and to use more heat. If oil is heated too much, it will reach its smoke point, which causes the oil to break down and become unsuitable for use in healing preparations. When oil is cooked along with water, this limits the temperature of the oil because the boiling point of water is lower than the smoke point of oil. By cooking water along with the oil, it is possible to expose the oil to a very high temperature for a long time without risk of overheating the oil, for the maximum release of herbal substance into the oil. Herbs do not readily transfer their healing properties into oil, as they do with water. Herbs steeped or boiled in water readily transfer their properties to the water. If the water-soluble essence of the herbs is first transferred into water, this essence is much more easily absorbed by the oil. It is also possible to make 3 separate decoctions, but we have made them together for simplicity. We, however, are intentionally adding all of the kalka with the first third of the decoction to demonstrate why using too much kalka can be problematic. This is not ideal for the preparation of our tailam, but we can remove some of the kalka later after our demonstration and continue cooking the tailam as the recipe instructs. If you are making this recipe at home, 2 ounces of kalka only should be added for the first cooking, and the other 2 kalkas should be added to the oil in subsequent cookings. Sesame oil, called Siddha Tailam in Sanskrit, is the most commonly used base oil for preparing Ayurvedic Tailams. It is considered best for all purposes, and if a recipe does not indicate a specific type of oil to be used, it is assumed that sesame oil is intended. For our recipe, 1 cup of sesame oil is processed 3 times, each time adding 1 quart of decoction and 2 ounces of kalka. The repeated cooking allows for the addition of extra herbs, and this will create a very potent oil. For 1 cup of oil, we are using 1.5 pounds of herbs. We are using plain sesame oil, but we could also use murchita oil. Murchita oil is oil which has undergone a preparatory process called Taila murchana. Murchana literally means augmenting or strengthening. It is done to enhance the color and smell of oils and to increase their absorbability through the pores, and also to help remove the ama dosha of oil. Oil is heavy. It weakens digestion and increases toxic accumulation in the body. This is called ama dosha. Adding certain herbs to oil helps to balance out this quality of oil. We plan to make another video which deals with Taila Murchana in depth. The recipe for Shatafadi Tailam already includes herbs which increase its absorbability and help to balance the dosha of the oil. Aniseed, angelica, and licorice all have a pleasant aroma, and so Taila Murchana is not necessary for this recipe, so we have skipped that step. Though the subject of muhurta, or astrological timing for preparing herbal medicines, is beyond the scope of this video, we do wish to suggest its importance in the effort of making effective medicines. Medicines can be greatly empowered by the careful choice of a time when planetary energies support the process of healing. Likewise, the best medicines can be rendered ineffective by preparing them at inauspicious times. For longer processes, like the cooking of a medicated oil, the important muhurta, or moment to consider, is the commencement. We have selected a very auspicious time for starting this herbal oil. The nakshatra, or constellation, is Ashwini, which is generally regarded as the most supportive nakshatra for any active healing. This day is also the 8th lunar phase of the Shukla Paksha, or the waxing lunar cycle. The ascendant is the dual sign of Pisces. Pisces is unoccupied and her lord auspiciously placed in the 3rd house, an upachaya, or house of improvement. The 6th house is also unoccupied and its lord is also auspiciously placed in an upachaya. The 7th house is unoccupied, and the 8th house is occupied by an exalted Saturn, granting long life and wisdom to overcome disease. The day of the week is Friday, and the yoga is Siddha, which serves to empower medicines made at that time. If it is not possible to select an auspicious time for making medicine, the astrological charts should be evaluated anyway, so that propitiatory offerings to the 9 planets may be made to lessen the difficulties caused by the selection of an inauspicious time. Snahapaka, or the cooking of oil, is generally classified into 5 successive stages of doneness. These are amapaka, uncooked; mridupaka, soft-cooked; madhyapaka, medium-cooked; karapaka, hard-cooked; or dagdhapaka, burned. Amapaka, or the uncooked stage, denotes that the oil is not complete and that the essence of the herbs has not been absorbed by the cooking oil. This stage is indicated by the presence of water remaining in the kalka. If oil is taken from the heat at this stage, it will not only lack the healing qualities of the herbs, but will also tend to spoil due to the presence of water. The evaporation of all liquids can be recognized by the appearance of bubbles. With ghee, this stage is indicated by the disappearance of bubbles. At this point, the oil will smell fragrant with the scent of the herbs used for cooking. Using oil which has not completed cooking is said to cause indigestion. If a piece of the kalka is removed from the cooking oil before the liquid has evaporated and put into fire, it will produce loud cracking noises. Once the kalka comes to the first of the 3 following stages of completion, it will adhere together and form a wick shape if rolled between the fingers. Mridupaka, or the soft-cooked stage, is indicated by a slight stickiness due to residual traces of water in the kalka. Kalka taken from the oil at this stage will feel somewhat sticky and emit large quantities of oil when pressed between the fingers. This stage is said to be best for use for oils intended for nasya therapy. Madhyapaka, or the middle-cooked stage, is indicated by a kalka which is not at all sticky, but remains soft when pressed between the fingers. It emits a small quantity of oil upon pressure. This stage is said to be suitable for enema or internal consumption, and is considered to be best generally for all purposes. Karapaka, or the hard-cooked stage, is indicated by a kalka which feels hard and which does not emit any oil upon pressure. It is not burnt, however, and retains a pleasant aroma of herbs used for cooking. This stage is considered best for oils intended for massage and external application. Dagdapaka, or the burnt stage, is indicated by a burnt smell, acrid taste, and dry kalka which does not adhere into a solid mass when rolled. As the cooking continues beyond the stage of karapaka, the healing properties of the herbs are burnt off and the kalka becomes dry and separates into individual grains, rather than adhering as a mass when pressed. This stage of cooking is not only said to lack any therapeutic benefit. If this oil is used for Ayurvedic therapies, it will cause dryness, rashes, and burning sensations wherever it is used. Once the liquid has evaporated, the successive stages of cooking occur very quickly, so it is extremely important to identify these stages and to remove the oil from the heat at the appropriate stage. Once a person has practiced cooking herbal oil many times, it is easy to identify these successive stages. For those who are still learning to recognize the differences, there are 2 tests recommended: placing a small amount of kalka in the fire, rolling and pressing a small portion of kalka between the fingers.
As the kalka in the cooking oil becomes thick, it is important to stir constantly and to watch for the appearance of bubbles indicating that the oil is done. It can be helpful to smell the cooking oil at this time, which will become very fragrant as the cooking comes to the final stages. This is a good sign that the oil is almost done. If there are any hints of a burnt smell, this either means that the kalka is sticking to the bottom on account of stirring too little, or that the liquid has evaporated and the kalka is burning in the remaining oil. So we are demonstrating why it is necessary to use only a little amount of kalka. When the proportion of kalka to oil is too much, as the water evaporates from the cooking oil, the kalka becomes a thick paste in the pan, crowding the oil. When too much herb powder is used to make kalkam, the herbs are not properly exposed to the cooking oil. In this case, the kalka does not cook evenly, and the water does not evaporate thoroughly. When too much kalkam is used, not only will the herbal essence not be completely extracted into the oil, but certain parts of the kalkam will begin to burn before the liquid has evaporated from other parts. This is the worst possible scenario, where the disadvantages of amapaka, undercooking, and dagdhapaka, burning, will be simultaneously imparted to the finished oil. Any good cook will tell you that when cooking foods, especially when cooking in oil, it is very important for even cooking to occur, to never crowd the pan. This concept holds true for Tailam. The better approach when wanting to add extra potency to oil is repeated processing, as described earlier, using no more than 1/4 part kalka to 1 part oil for each successive processing of the oil. The finished oil is strained through cloth and then wrung to extract any oil remaining with the kalka. It is important to strain the oil when it is still quite warm. If the oil becomes too cool, particles of kalka may separate and come through the cloth into the finished tailam. This, however, is not a big problem because if particles of herbs do get into the finished tailam, they tend to settle to the bottom. After settling, the pure tailam can be easily decanted into another container, leaving the particles behind. Particles of herbs should not be allowed to stand for extended periods in the finished tailam, as they tend to accelerate the rate of decay. To complete this oil, we have cooked it 3 times in total, and this process has required 4 full days of work to complete. At this point, it may be desirable to add gandha dravyas, or substances to enhance the aroma of the finished tailam. Herbs used for scenting tailams may include sandalwood, camphor, musk, saffron, cloves, cinnamon, anise, bay leaf, cardamom, calamus, and many other fragrant herbs. If used, gandha dravyas are typically used in an amount of 1/8 of the oil. A coarse powder of these herbs is added while the oil is still warm and allowed to macerate for 24 hours before straining. Herbs for adding fragrance to the finished oil are generally not cooked, as the fragrant components of the herbs are usually also the most volatile, and most of the fragrance would be lost during prolonged heating. We do not recommend the use of essential oils to scent tailams for many reasons, but prefer this more traditional method when scenting oils is desired. Essential oils aggravate the doshas and tend to alter the healing properties of the finished oil. We will deal with the subject of gandha dravyas and essential oils more extensively in our video on Tailam Murchanam. Because the herbs in Shathavati Tailam smell pleasant enough, gandha dravyas are not necessary. Once finished, most tailams may be kept in a dry bottle away from light and heat for 1 to 3 years without losing their potency. If kept dry, tailams do not spoil, but the herbs will lose their potency over time, and the oil itself will tend to become rancid. Shathavati tailam is suitable for all 3 doshas, but may be a little bit heating for pitta in long-term usage unless it is diluted in a cooling base oil like ghee or coconut oil. When diluted as instructed in part 1 of this video, this oil is safe for general usage for daily abhyanga or oil massage, as prescribed by the Ayurvedic texts. Because it is generally good for all 3 doshas, and for its simplicity of ingredients, this oil has been selected for demonstration of the procedure for making Ayurvedic herbal oils. Other herbs and oils could be used to make Tailam. Tailam can be made according to this procedure using any single herb, but herbs work best when used in combination with other herbs. The proportions for making Tailam are discussed in part 1 of this video. For people who do not have a deep knowledge of the principles of blending herbs, it is wise to use the traditional recipes given by the Ayurvedic texts. Whenever using Indian Ayurvedic herbs, it is important to buy only from companies that can prove with documentation that their herbs have been sustainably sourced. Most of the popular Ayurvedic herbs are threatened to become extinct in their natural habitats due to reckless overharvesting. The Indian government has been conducting studies on the state of Ayurvedic herbs in the wild, and the results are alarming. It is contrary to the fundamental concepts of Ayurveda to abuse our natural resources in this way, and doing so will cause us to lose the ability to make or use the powerful formulas the sages have revealed. If an herb is not available from sustainable sources, it is imperative for us to avoid using that herb and to rely upon substitutes. If we do not act now to save the precious Indian herbs from extinction, these herbs will be lost forever. Ayurveda cannot be taught or learned overnight, and if it is simplified too much to meet the Western expectations for instant gratification, its true healing power will be lost. It is not wise to use the threatened Indian Ayurvedic herbs to create many new varieties of herbal preparations like those which now line the shelves of the health food stores in the U.S. Most of these preparations come and go from the shelves very quickly because they are ineffective. It is a waste of good Ayurvedic herbs to use them to make, for example, a Western-style infused oil. Formulas prepared in these modern ways cannot truly be described as Ayurvedic, though they contain Ayurvedic herbs. They are modern experiments having no basis in the ancient tradition of Ayurveda. If we, as Western-born practitioners of Ayurveda, can develop the patience and discipline to dedicate ourselves to the study of Ayurvedic Pharmacology, then the time-tested methods of Ayurvedic herbal preparation can be applied to the many wonderful herbs which grow here in the U.S. This is the sensible way for the great knowledge of Ayurvedic herbology to be applied. But in order to create our own Western Ayurvedic formulas, we must learn the traditional methods for preparing herbs by studying the ancient formulas, which have proven their efficacy over many hundreds and thousands of years since their revelation by the sages. It is our sincere hope that this video increase knowledge about the special properties of Ayurvedic herbal oils and foster understanding of and appreciation for the complex, expensive, and lengthy process of making traditional Siddha Tailam. The complex system of Ayurvedic healing is unique among the healing traditions of the world for its holistic approach, which incorporates knowledge of the highest spiritual realization for the transformation of consciousness. No other system of herbalism in the world has such complex methods for preparing herbal medicines, and no other herbal medicines are quite so effective. With the proper knowledge of making and using Ayurvedic herbal formulas, even diseases considered incurable by Western medicine are easily remedied. Many Western practitioners of Ayurveda and Western Ayurvedic herbal manufacturers are beginning to make Ayurvedic herbal preparations, but many have not studied the traditional methods for preparing herbs. It is important for people to be aware of the complex and fascinating methods of Dravya Kalpanam, for Ayurvedic pharmacology. It is our humble belief that the true gift of Ayurveda is not the particular herbs that it has used, but the unique methods of preparation which have been devised by the sages and tested over many thousands of years of use. These methods are admittedly complex, time-consuming, and difficult to master, but when used properly, they result in medicines with truly magical healing potential. Standards of education for Ayurvedic practitioners in the US are now too low, with many correspondence courses granting certification to practitioners, and many programs requiring 500 hours or less of study. Ayurvedic pharmacists in India are required to complete at least 1,000 hours of study, including hands-on training making medicines before they can practice, and the program for Ayurvedic doctors is much longer than this. People have little understanding of this in the US, due in part to a lack of information available about the traditional practice of Ayurveda. People do have a growing interest in Ayurveda in the West, and without good sources for studying traditional Ayurveda, people are taking the little bit of information available and filling the gaps creatively. There are certain regulations in India and certain recipes and procedures outlined by the ancient texts, which must be followed by manufacturers of Ayurvedic medicine. It is wise for practitioners of Ayurveda to work together to create similar standards here in the US. If we do not raise the standards, Ayurveda shall be doomed in the West to be oversimplified and its true potential for healing lost. We hope this video helps to dispel the many misconceptions about Ayurvedic herbs and herbal preparations, and that it helped to inspire Western practitioners of Ayurveda to embark upon a deeper study of the traditional methods for preparing herbs. This complex subject requires many years of study to master, but it is surely worth the effort. May the Lord, who has shown the science of Ayurveda to the sages, bless those who teach the traditional practices of Ayurveda, so that its knowledge may be spread to the West, with its spiritual authenticity intact.